The Big Sell Illuminati, where some of the best in the business discuss what's worked, what's working, and what's failed in selling big sales. Our panel of experts includes Clarity Seeker, a black belt of brands, our snarky marketer, Monique de Maio. CEO to CEO selling is his game. Fortune 500 in his lane. The Lex Luthor of the close, Mark Kennedy. The effective executive, a force on the boards, a buyer on fire, Tiffany Olson. David versus Goliath selling, the prince of process, Sun Tzu of big sales strategy, Tom Searcy. And that's your panel. Now it's time to talk about big sales.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Big Sale Illuminati, episode 6. And today we're going to be talking about personal brands. And specifically, we know that as salespeople, there's a whole idea about our business brand and how that reflects out in the marketplace. But if you're a salesperson or a sales executive, how are you projecting out that crosswalk of your personal brand into leveraging it in selling your brand as a company? We have a variety of different things that we want to talk about. Of course, we have Tiffany Olson here, buyer on fire. We also have Mark Kennedy, who is the Lex Luthor of the close, our snarky marketer. Down there, Monique de Maio, and I am the Sun Tzu of the sales close, of big sales and big sales strategy. So, hey, everybody. First and foremost, we want to talk about brands as it relates to ideas about brands that are out in the marketplace and the personas that we have around those. If you were to pick a spokesmodel or spokesperson that was most relevant to BMW or Mercedes-Benz, out of say just the national famous people from movies and music and television, etc., who would you pick to be the right one, the personal brand that conveys the same kind of message as BMW would want for themselves or Mercedes? Who wants to go first? I'll go with Monique.
All right. BMW, easy for me. Any Bond man. I think it's Pierce Brosnan, it's Daniel Craig, or Idris Elba. Okay. There would be that. So those are my BMW men.
I'm going to go Lance Armstrong for BMW.
Lance Armstrong?
All in for performance.
Wow.
Damn the torpedoes, all in for performance. I've owned a couple of these things. I've owned a couple of both. You know, the crazy details that are in the BMW, like they'll put the battery, offset the driver to offset his weight or her weight to counterbalance the car. Like the cars are perfectly balanced weight-wise. Like you can literally hold them on a central fulcrum and they'll pivot right in the middle of the car, which is why they handle so well. So I'm going to go like Lance Armstrong and the consummate, unending, do anything to win.
Wow. Okay. That was a brand decision I hadn't thought of. I put in Tom Hiddleston because I had this picture of him, in the car driving or talking to you, and he would have the credibility of it, but he would still have that kind of devilish look, like a Ryan Reynolds. Just kind of that little bit of BMW is fun, and so I would love to have Tom Hiddleston as that spokesmodel for that. Tiffany, we gave you a little bit of stretch. Are you going to tee on that and move on to the Mercedes?
I would say for the BMW, and Mark, I never knew those features of the BMW. I'm not a car person, so I think that is pretty dang cool. I just wonder what happens if you eat like a big dinner and then you get back in the car, if it like repivots itself. But I would say that sounds like a real Tom Brady type of a car when you
Good.
That is a good call.
Good.
So that's what I would say for BMW.
Okay, well, let's do the same thing for Mercedes. Again, the focus is spokesperson whose personal brand translates through to the regular brand, because all of us are working on our own personal brands. If we know it or don't know it, we'll talk about that a little bit later. How does it translate over? Let's see. Monique, let's go back to you. On Mercedes, who do you have?
So I have two. I have Santa and I have Denzel Washington. Where you have Idris on one side, you want to take two good-looking, very well-spoken, great black actors. Denzel's in the Mercedes, and Idris is in the BMW. There you go. I'm a car person, so you can get me talking about cars for hours.
That's hard to do. I have this picture of you on some phone books being able to drive these cars.
Well, okay, let me tell you a funny story. So here's a funny story. When I was publisher of Brand Week, we had an outing where we took all of our clients to a Formula One racing weekend. It's a lot of fun. And, they do it in Line Rock and Southampton and all these places. And so I show up and they're like, oh, they had to get me a specially equipped vehicle though, where the seat was a lot closer to the pedals than everybody else, but didn't stop me. Still did it. Anyway, we digress.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Both of these logos, if you know anything about these companies, both of those logos are airplane references because both of them originally started as aerospace companies or airplane companies, and they morphed during the war to, military equipment and then cars. I'm going to go with Mercedes is Toto Wolff. And Toto Wolff is the team principal for Mercedes F1 team. And I say that because I think Mercedes is a brand that is right now in the process of trying to remake itself. I think back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, Mercedes was the unquestionable king of luxury and reliability. And then they just got uncool, right? They had a relationship with Daimler, and BMW basically took over. And since then, Mercedes has been trying to remake itself as not a stodgy old company. They've been trying to move more towards a performance basis. And if you know who Toto Wolff is, or ever watched the Netflix series Drive to Survive, he is so hopelessly German. He is stiff. He is the essence of their brand, which I think was why he's been successful in that role. He's won like 6 or 7 F1 titles, but he is the absolute essence of the attempt to remake the brand on more of a performance basis. So, and their AMG cars are terrific. They make amazing engines, but Toto Wolff would be my example of the difference between the two.
Well, inside of the brands, you would have to have someone who understood some of those things to go ahead and speak to the brand. I think it'd be cool. I wouldn't mind hearing more about him. But on the Benz, who do you have, Tiffany? I know you're not a car person, but somebody come to mind?
Yes, actually, someone does. Because when I think of Mercedes, I think that they are really trying to market a lot to women these days, very wealthy, well educated, cultured. And I kind of think of Oprah as someone who really kind of fits this brand of this educated, sophisticated, and definitely a wealthy woman. So that would be my pick for Mercedes.
I would have to see the commercial where Oprah's in the back of a Mercedes talking about the Mercedes, how wonderful it is. And at the end, we cut away to her chauffeur who's at the front driving her.
Or her giveaway, right? This is what she gives away on her show.
All right, so we're going to have to move this along a little bit because it's too much fun, but we have to keep going because it's important to crosswalk this over to personal brand. I would just say on mine for the Mercedes, I had Benedict Cumberbatch. He's a guy who looks like precision. He's rapid in his delivery. He's kind of elegant in some of his style pieces. So that would have been mine. Let's hit these ones faster. They're old. I mean, when I say older, they're ones that we've seen before as far as Apple and Microsoft. And Apple and Microsoft have had a variety of different spokesmodels or spokespersons, brand representatives, starting first with their founders, obviously Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. But since then, those are the founders whose, Steve has passed. Bill looks like he has. So I've got for Apple, I put in Damian Lewis, who's the guy from Axe. He was in Homeland. He was Axe from Billions. He's been in a lot of different things. Kind of a redheaded guy, very very fast, very clipped, very energetic, very smart. Or Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I had that too.
Yeah.
I had that too.
Yeah. Taylor Swift, huge creator, right? In lots of fronts, podcasts, and obviously all of her music and her videos and etc. And Apple is a creator's place. And then I said for Microsoft, I put Michael Fassbender. He's still got enough edge to him, a little bit forward look. If I was Microsoft, I could probably talk myself into Tom Hiddleston. But you would at least have some positioning of the brand as far as being something other than stodgy, something a little bit more, been around a while, pretty strong. Mark, who do you have?
Apple, I got Ryan Reynolds. Good looking, great design, successful in numerous different walks of life, and at the same time, so successful and so suspiciously good looking that you wonder if his supply chain isn't wrecking the planet. So I think he's right on with Apple. And then I've got Pee Wee Herman for Microsoft, which is not relevant since the 90s.
Why Pee Wee?
Just because, had a big moment, got himself in a spot of bother, kind of like Microsoft, and then just kind of quietly faded into oblivion. But I'm sure, like Microsoft, still cashes the royalties. So
yeah, about 95% of the planet on Microsoft. But again, money's not everything.
there's got to be a better one, because the problem with the uniquely different things about them in terms of the product focus, like Microsoft has always been pretty mediocre stuff.
You think so?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think of Microsoft as being really a very strong, serious business brand. In all of the companies that I've worked with, Microsoft is really kind of the go-to. But what I had for the brands, and I was watching American Idol, so I think that Katy Perry is more of the Apple, and I would say that Lionel Richie, a little bit, mature, established, very trustworthy and credible would be my Microsoft.
Nice.
See, I've worked with them. I think Microsoft is ruthless.
They are.
They are ruthless. I've done some work with them as well, and honestly, it can get ugly in the trenches. Let's move on to the last one, because we're doing this crosswalk, and it's an interesting exercise because everybody's gonna have to figure out in a minute. We're selling into companies and we are making big sales. To do that, we have to have our own personal brand aligns with our own company's brand. A lot of us don't think about the power of our own personal brand. So I put up Las Vegas versus Nashville. If you can see, they're both bright, shiny objects. They attract a lot of people on a regular basis, but so there's a lot of similarities between those two, just like the cars and the software. But you would have very different people be the spokespeople. I'll start. I took, for Nashville, I took Carrie Underwood.
So did I.
Yeah, it's a bit on the nose. I agree. It's a little bit but that's a good thing. If she was the spokesmodel, you can't do Dolly Parton or Wayne Newton for Vegas, in my opinion, because they have an expiration date on their spokesmodel of somewhere between 9 and 18 months, and then after that, everything goes to risk. And then Las Vegas, I had Vince McMahon for Las Vegas, but I actually found a better guy, Jason Momoa. If Jason Momoa was doing it, and you ran through an ad, etc., the tagline would be "Anything can happen." And I think with Jason Momoa, there's the potential that anything could happen.
I don't consume enough popular media. I have no idea who he is.
I don't either.
You don't know who Jason Momoa is? Okay, Game of Thrones. He was head of the Dothraki, and then more important, in Aquaman, he was the head of Aquaman. He was never mind. Anyway, if you saw Jason Momoa's photo, you would know who he was because you've seen him everywhere, but you might not know his name. So anyway, what else do we have? Let's go, Tiffany. I know you spent a lot of time in Vegas.
I have, and some of it I do actually remember having been there. But I would say for me, when when I think of Vegas, I think of Siegfried and Roy.
Me too.
Just a stable show that when you went to Vegas, you wanted to go there. You've got the magic, you've got the fantasy part of it, you've got the over the top. And that was mine for Las Vegas.
All right. When you have Monique, have you given us a Vegas one yet?
No, but I'll say Sinatra and Trump.
Okay, but here's if I'm in Vegas right now and I'm trying to represent myself as a place that's attractive.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I got one for you.
Yeah, what?
Bert Kreischer is my Vegas. Do you know who he is? He's that comedian that does his deal or his act with his shirt off. And the reason I say that is this: what Vegas has done is Vegas was originally Sin City, and then they tried to go corporate, and they tried to go family, make it family friendly, and then finally they just said, "F it, I am going to be what I am, and I'm going to be Sin City." So they've kind of come full circle. And he's sort of been like that too. He started as a mess, tried to rehabilitate himself, and eventually just said, "Screw it, I am what I am, here I am. And I'm never going to stop drinking. I'm always going to be up here without my shirt on." And I think that's what Vegas has done unapologetically. I feel like.
And some of the funniest, if you ever get a chance, go look at it, go listen to or watch his Russian mafia story. It's hysterical. All right, who else are we missing in Vegas and Nashville? So who's your Nashville on that one, by the way, Mark?
Oh, my Nashville is Reese Witherspoon, for no other reason that she looks like she goes to a lot of bachelorette parties.
Okay. All right. And who hasn't had a chance to go ahead and kick in on this? Monique, did you get a chance?
So I had help from my staff because I had no idea what to say about Nashville. So Chris Stapleton and I'm I had Dolly Parton, but she's passé.
She is.
I have no idea. I've never been to Nashville, so I can't help you.
One of my favorite places to go.
But I mean, I know it's funny. So we're talking. I mean, let's bring it full circle, right? We're talking about these places as if they're people, and people have DNA, and they have characteristics, and they have these things. And it's very interesting how quickly this group can assert the DNA of certain places or brands. And, obviously we're going to segue into how we do that with other people and how that shows up when we do a sales call, right? So it's just very interesting to me to hear these perspectives, how quickly we have some of these artists pegged with DNA and attributes that pertain to brands. It's just really, really cool.
It's interesting when I go into a Starbucks and I look at the baristas. They have a certain set of training and communication and how they hire and who they hire. And so you can kind of, within reason, understand who somebody says, I work at Starbucks, you'd understand. You go to an Apple store, right? You have a very clear understanding, other than the blue shirt, of this person is very credible as a technician. And they're usually, they're outside of the norm. They look like creative people. They look like people that have got a different approach to life, and etc. You expect the same thing. IBM a million years ago was all blue suits, red shirts, or red ties, white shirts, and etc. And there's that pass through.
You ever use the airline service Clear? You ever use that?
Yeah, I used to a million years ago. Yeah.
Well, if you travel a lot, you do. It's basically something you put on top of TSA. It's got like an additional level of like biometrics and screening and whatever. Their employees are uniformly helpful, uniformly available. They know what to do. They're well trained. They've always got their uniforms right. Like it's an amazing system that they've built on top of this bizarrely generated security problem we've got. But it's an amazing service. But their brand and the way they've gotten uniformity of that brand is really quite remarkable.
Chick-fil-A is another one.
Chick-fil-A, absolutely.
So Monique, help us out here. We keep saying, so some companies are trying to hire to, at least train to, or show to a brand that is at least reflective. Because you asked the question, are people like brands and brands like people and products and services, which I think is just one of those great questions. Help us to get there. We've thrown out a few of those. Are there some other brands where you see that people become products and services and how they connect? How does that work?
Companies have DNA that we attribute to their brand. They become like a person with attributes, positive and negative, and differentiators, and the rest that are lifelike. Similarly, people have their own brands, whether they know it or not. The secret is knowing that you have a brand and using it to your advantage in a sales situation or in an executive situation. Being comfortable and owning that brand. The beauty is when you work for a company where your two brands are aligned. So if you're working for an irreverent, snarky, startup brand, and you're irreverent and snarky, that's a great fit. So somebody like me can't work for back in the day. The reason I left IBM is because my personal DNA was so far removed from the corporate DNA of IBM in that day. So that was a misfit. That was, they said your career path is to stay in sales and sell mainframes. That was like put a needle in my eyeball and twist it. That was not going to happen. So I was clear that didn't work for me because that was not my alignment. So in this game that we're playing in this podcast is understanding brands as a general rule, how they pertain to people, how they pertain to companies, and then matching them properly.
It's interesting. Back in the day, I was running a company and we were selling a huge, multi-million-dollar contract, hundreds of millions of dollars to UPS. And at that time, UPS was comparing us against two very, very large players in the marketplace, ginormous players in the marketplace. And here we're this little $30 million company who's trying to get this contract. And what UPS eventually decided to go with us is that we came in, our brand was based upon safety of buying from us and innovation, thinking outside of the box. And the third one was priority, which means that they knew we would every day get up and that would be kind of the clear picture of what our lives would be like. And we knew that those were the three things we wanted to stand on. We couldn't stand on being, a Fortune 500 company. We couldn't stand on the idea that that there was something terribly unique about our technology platform. We had to stand on the brand. So everybody knew when we were going into meetings, this is what we want our brand to be in these conversations. Now, our brand was bigger than all of that, but every time we touched all the people on our team who were selling, they understood that's what we want them to think, feel, and understand about us when we do this. Tiffany and I have had some chances to do some work together. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, both Tom and Monique, what you bring up is that when corporations really know what they want to be and they articulate it and their values show it, then if you work for them, you're able to articulate that brand. Tom, the points that you brought up really kind of become the tagline and the selling points. And then people understand what those values are. And so it's easy to understand, what the company stands for, what you stand for, and then you've got to deliver it because where this can unravel very quickly. And Mark, you mentioned the clear at the airport is if they can't deliver it. So if something falls down, then all of a sudden you've got that trust issue because what you say is not really what you're doing. So it's all got to connect through. And as a brand, everyone, and we've talked about this, has their own personal brand. Your company will have their own brand. And it doesn't have to be the same, but you need to be aligned with that, I think, to really be successful in that kind of environment. And Monique, you mentioned that, and I totally agree.
I don't think we have to be homogenous. I think you're not saying that, Tiffany, at all. When you bring your brand and your company's brand, it doesn't mean that you throw away your own personality and your own energy and all the rest of the things. But like you said, there are elements that have to come into alignment. I'm going to go back to my UPS story for just one moment. We had an IT guy who was just so creative and so great. He would go into meetings though, and he would just what we would call watercolor the walls. And that would be, well, we could do this and we could do that. And here's all these other things we could do. Da, da, da. And, I had a conversation with him and said, we're not going to go ahead and talk about what we could do. We're going to talk about what we will do and that we understand that we're doing, not just creating this idea that there's a full palette of colors and you, Mr. Customer, choose from it later. After the first meeting, we understood he couldn't quite get there. We wanted him on our team. When in the first meeting, I said, I think really what Val is saying is that he's going to add a lot of value in our third meeting. This like saying, shut up now, and we're going to come back. And they never saw Val again. We kept him. He was fantastic. He worked on the account, of course, but this is a guy who should not be let out of the Emerald City. All right, he's got to stay in the back behind the curtain.
That's a really good part of the brand story too. It's like who is front in your meetings, Mr. Sales Executive? Who do you bring to the first, second, and third or whatever meetings? Because they're coming in with that sensibility that may or may not work for that customer. And so if you're not clear what Val and Tiffany and Mark and Tom are bringing, think about that as the palette that you're bringing in for that brand color and say, okay, well, for this meeting, I'm going to let this one stand down because he'll blow it up. And I'm going to bring this one in first because she's going to, get their attention and so on and so forth. So you have to play with those attributes in order and in sequence and in the right sequence.
Well, you bring up a huge point because I think of Tiffany and I think about all of us when we got large sales. You're really casting the play. Who are the people that are going to fit these? They all are a part of our company. They're all part of our team, but we're putting on a specific play for a specific company. Who do I bring to that casting? And I've just spent, like I said, spent some time with Tiffany. She's very, you speak for yourself, but very thoughtful about casting. Very thoughtful about aligning this person with that person. I don't know if you want to make a comment on that or not, Tiffany.
Yeah, I would just say I think that it becomes really important because if everyone knows their role, and Tom, this is where you've really helped immensely. So if you have, let's say, 15 people, let's say it's a huge meeting, huge presentation, you've got many, many people from your company, everyone needs to know the role that they play and what parts that they can participate in. So for example, Tom, when you talked about Val, clearly where you could use him in his comments. And Tom has this great analogy called really the shoe, which is a Vegas analogy because it's that card shoe that you have, and the dealer is the one that's giving the cards to different people, and that person directs what's going on in that meeting. And so it really enables, I think, a really nice flow, but for everybody to use their strengths to continue, really reinforcing that brand message also.
Yeah, no, it's how they, I was just going to add one thing to segue off of what Tiffany was saying. It's how they show up, what they do, what they say, and how they deliver it, right? So then how are they going to be perceived will dictate how that customer is going to qualify them as to what their brand is, whether they like it or not. So it's really important for that salesperson to be clear that no matter whether they do it intentionally or non-intentionally, they are putting out a brand message.
I at least take a very literal orchestration to those things. I will sit down with people before a sales meeting because I bring a lot of subject matter experts into the process later in the process, not really early, but later in the process. And then people that aren't used to being in those situations. And, for example, what happens if someone asks you about money and you're like some kind of a technical person? What do I do? Right? The answer is you don't do anything. What happens, at what point are you, at some point in this meeting, I'm going to interrupt you and have you stop talking. You need to understand what those cues look like, right? At what point are you digging yourself into a hole and how do we get you out of? So there is a lot of orchestration, I think. And I think it's at least early in my career, I would give people the benefit of the doubt. And I found myself kicking a lot of technical people under the table. And, but now I think it's easier to be a lot more just explicit around, how to orchestrate what they're going to do.
So for big sales so far, out of the things that we've talked about, I just want to kind of bring it in together and then we move forward. Number one, if you are running a big sale hunt, you're going after a new big deal, whether you're the CEO, COO, CRO, or the key salespeople, you have to figure out what is the brand punch points, like I use with UPS. These are the punch points that are going to be valuable. Secondly, everybody on your team has to know this is what the value points are. Third, it has to be consistent with, you can't go in and pretend that you're something that you're not, right? So there has to be, and then there's one other piece, which is casting matters and orchestration. I mean, yeah, sometimes it feels like you're running a 3-ring circus, right? And you're the master, I wouldn't say mistress, that doesn't work right. Master of ceremonies.
I see. Just keep going, Tom. Good. Before you dig yourself a grave. Go ahead. Go.
Yeah, we're a little late on that. Sorry. But my point is that those pieces right there, if you just took those 4 things and said, I'm going into my biggest sales, I got to do these 4 things. I can't just show up like I do every normal day saying, hey, I'm calling and I want to find out what you want to have. And etc. You got to have more preparation than that along your brand.
And even to the point where you have to prep your people on what to wear and not to wear. Like I remember being told point blank at IBM that my stockings had patterns and that was not acceptable. And I didn't have the right bow tie in my, in my blouse. And that was like a real problem for them. They were like, you don't fit here.
Well, that was their brand, right? They had a certain brand, a certain look, a certain uniform. And the uniform sometimes is unspoken versus spoken. When you go to a company and they hand you a uniform, that's a pretty spoken uniform, that's what you're going to wear. But the unspoken ones, like IBM and other companies, it's being aware that that is the uniform. That is what you will wear and how you will look and show up in front of the customer.
Yeah. And it was unspoken till it was spoken, Tiffany.
Yes. It's unspoken until you violate that unspoken rule. And then all of a sudden they let you know.
Yeah, I was too young to know that I was unspeakingly putting out a message that I was unspeakingly not supposed to. Anyway, so we want, the brand message is really fun when we start to equate the individual with the brand. And so what Tom's idea was, and I'm sure he'll be back in a couple of seconds, Tom's idea was to figure out who each other's brands were. If we were to replicate one of us with a spokesperson that was not us, actor, actress, player, anybody that's out in the public domain that people would recognize their names, who would that be and why? And so I'm going to turn it over to one of you guys to say who each other's brand would be and why. So we can have a conversation so people understand how this process is working subliminally and indirectly as well as directly. Go ahead.
I'll start with you, Monique. You are you're Plankton from SpongeBob SquarePants because you're diminutive. We've never actually met in person, but I have this impression you're diminutive in size, incredibly powerful, and seeking some form of world domination. And there has to be just some level of, there's a little bit of evil in there somewhere, but I think the irony of it all is the size gets you. So I think that's your Plankton from SpongeBob SquarePants. The next one is Tiffany, and you are Jonathan Cleese from A Fish Called Wanda.
Oh my God.
Because you have this wonderful formality about you that borders on being British, and at the same time, I think if we got a drink or two in you, you'd probably be a hell of a lot of fun.
Are you saying I'm not fun now? Is that what you're saying?
I'm trying to insult everybody. And the last one, I really wish I had a better one, but you get to be Tom Cruise from Mission Impossible. So the guy that figures stuff out on the fly when it has to get done, when it absolutely has to matter. So you got a good one. I wanted yours to be worse, but I couldn't come up with a bad one.
What's your own? Did you tell him?
Oh, mine's easy. You don't even need to. I mean, there's only one it could be.
Who?
What?
I'm The Rock. I'm Dwayne Johnson. I'm a caricature of myself.
So I had 3 for you, Mark Kennedy. 3. It is Jon Stewart, Christian Bale, and John Mulaney.
Oh, I love John Mulaney. I'm a huge John Mulaney fan.
Me too.
By the way, John Mulaney might have the best he might be the cleanest delivered comedian I've ever seen. His work is impeccable.
It is. It's amazing. It's really amazing. I don't know if the Coke has helped him or her. Sorry, I digress. Tiffany.
Yes.
Emma Thompson, Kate Winslet.
Mm.
And there's a reason. Grace under pressure, super, super sophisticated, but with a wicked sense of humor. You don't see it coming. When they deliver a line, it hits you right between the eyes, and that's what you do. You don't see it coming, all of a sudden you're like, Jesus Christmas, what was that? That was like a bullet. It's awesome. All right, and then Tom, if he can hear us, is Bill Maher, potentially Steve Carell, and maybe Sacha Baron Cohen. I am, and actually funny, my Brianna, who works with me here, said a combination of Rachel Hollis and Sarah Blakely.
I will go next. So, Mark, for you, I have George Carlin.
George Carlin.
And it's because funny, witty, a little out there, not afraid to say what you think, tell people, hey, cover up because I'm smashing this watermelon and it's going to go all over you. So and you're very, very funny. So that's who when I was thinking of this exercise. Tom, for you, I actually had 2, but one, MacGyver, because you do figure it out. You sit back, you figure it out, you have a bobby pin and you've got a stapler and duct tape, and somehow you can figure out how to get out of the elevator with that. So that for me, I thought of you. And also, I don't know if you guys know who Greg Gutfeld is. So he can be very controversial. He just says what he thinks. It comes off the top of his head, and he's a political has a kind of satire show.
Mm-hmm.
Which really reminds me of Tom quite a bit. And Monique, for you, I would say Sandra Bullock, because she is very tough, smart, funny, not afraid to say what she thinks, and she is a great mom. And I know that you've got kids and family and that they're important. So when I was thinking of you, that's who I thought of.
Thank you. I'll take that. That's a really good one. I appreciate that. And who are you?
Oh my gosh. I think it's funny that you all think that I've got these British tendencies. So maybe I would say someone like a Meryl Streep, who is always very measured in what she will say and respond to maybe a little bit more formal in some of her communications.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't want to throw a third one in there, but I had Meryl Streep as my third.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yep. Because I have an enormous respect for Meryl Streep. She puts out. She's wicked funny too, but she's always very measured and thoughtful in her responses and in her delivery. And I think that's a superpower of yours. And I'll die without it. So anyway, that I guess since Tom is having a little technical problems, we want to just bring it back to guys. You got to think about people who are listening or watching. You've got to think about these brands strategically. Who do you put in the room and why? How do they show up? What are their attributes? What are their strengths and weaknesses? How are they going to land? How are they going to come across by the people that you're selling to or trying to sell to? You guys want to add some color around that so that we can kind of start to wrap up the session?
I would also say, because I think people really struggle with what is my own personal brand. And I've had a lot of people ask me, how do I even start with understanding what my personal brand is? And I always give them this piece of advice, which is go and ask your colleagues or friends, when you think of me, what are the first 3 words that come to mind? Get that data. It's going to be really rich. Ask as many people, and then just listen. Are there things that get repeated? And if there are, then that's pretty much what you are, showing up as. And if you like it, great, continue it. If you don't, then you have to think about how do you change that. And I also think of it as, know what your own hashtag is in business. So think of, with these attributes, what would your hashtag be? Because then that's easy to remember and to bring up when you're in a situation.
Yeah, those are great points. I think one of the things I've learned about the concept of brand, and a brand is basically you're basically putting forth a strength and a message, right? A brand is you're going to build off of a strength, and you're going to base your brand on that most likely. And what I've learned over the years is that where you have these core strengths and these core concentrations, it actually creates. It's great because you can build on that. You can walk in that in confidence. But the difficulty of is every time you have a strength, it creates a blind spot. So the opposite of something like this, that person, their brand is they exude confidence, they exude great outcomes, they exude this, they exude that. The opposite side of that, because when we get under pressure, we always overuse our strengths. And it creates these blind spots, whereas you don't listen or you don't lean in or you don't engage your team because it's you, if you're the confident person or whatever. I mean, there's a bunch of different traits to these brands. And I think that's one of the areas that you really have to be careful of. First off, knowing thyself, right? But second is, when you're working with teams and you're bringing this collection of brands together, kind of understanding where you're going to get into trouble ahead of time is often as important as it's really doing well. I mean, I think it's crucial.
Well said.
That's exactly right. The flip side of strength being that Achilles heel is a very, very important part.
Well, I know we're wrapping, and I've been in and out and up and down. Technology seems to be operating differently here at the White House. There's so many there's so many signal jammers going on. It's just really hard for me. If we look at what the takeaway from this, I guess for everybody we're talking about is also includes, other than things that were said before, is, hey, what is your brand? We had some fun saying our brand. If I was to be represented by a spokesperson for me, who represented me with continuity, I get Tom Cruise, which means I've been lying about my height forever. But also it represents a certain. I have Emma Thompson for Tiffany, and I had Dennis Miller for Mark, and I had Sarah Silverman for Monique.
There he goes. All right. I would encourage
I'm sure it was
everyone.
going to be brilliant what he was going to say, though.
Yeah, of course he was. He was going to say, I would encourage everybody. And he would say exactly what Tiffany said 5 minutes ago. The common thing about what you said is that is the process that I use with people when they try to figure out their literally. What are the top 3 words? Ask your circle to give you 3 words. And if you were a vehicle, what brand would you be? For some reason, women have trouble with car brands. So I'll say, if you were a clothing brand, what would you be, and why?
Mm-hmm.
And so it gets to the heart of the attributes that you want, and then you can change that if you don't want to be stuck with it.
Yes, exactly. It's a great exercise for people to do.
So thank you all for being here. I think we're going to wrap up today because I think our host is having some serious technical issues. So go out there, be the best brand you can be. Find the company that aligns with your brand. Make sure, and if it doesn't, then fake it till you make it, baby. But you gotta line those two up, and then you get the big sale. Thank you for being here. Bye.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Big Sale Illuminati podcast. If you like this episode, give us a thumbs up and let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Until our next episode, best wishes on your big sales.